Howdy y'all, welcome to Nerd Studio. We're out at the range today, going to talk about our rights. Stay tuned. So if you watch the channel, you know we support the Second Amendment here at Nerd Studio. Probably not a huge surprise. In fact, it's a large part of what we do here is exercise our Second Amendment right. I love firearms. I think it's a great hobby. I'm very enamored with the idea of being able to protect myself. I think everybody should have that right. And in fact, as the Constitution says, we all have it regardless of what a government says. They can certainly infringe on it, but they can't ever take it away. That's a God-given right, or if you prefer, a natural right. The issue is, though, really, it's funny, and it's one of the things that just constantly bothers me. I can go out and I can look at just the sheer logic and tell you it makes absolutely no sense to ban firearms or bump stocks or ammunition, anything of that kind, anything that is inert when it sits by itself. I mean, that's why we don't own nuclear weapons. For goodness sakes, I can't store a nuclear weapon safely. I can't store hand grenades safely. I don't have the equipment to do it. But firearms sit in my cabinet. They're inert. They do nothing until I pick them up and act with them. So the logical argument behind why people want to ban these things is non-existent. So, you know, my journey through this, I got to really looking at it. I went out and I read the Constitution. I looked at interpretations of it. I looked at how the Heller decision, DC versus Heller, came out, and it said that firearms in common use were protected under the Second Amendment. So common use, you know, think of your handguns and AR-15s, all of those things are protected according to that decision. And went, okay, I get it. I went out and looked at the FBI data, and violence in this country goes down every year. This school shooting thing, it goes down every year. The number of them go down every year. We live in a safer, increasingly safer country, yet the purchase of firearms is going through the roof. During the Obama administration, the firearm ownership shot up to an incredible level. So the logic simply says that the problems, first of all, they're decreasing, and what's causing them has nothing to do with firearms. You know, when I was a little kid, my older brothers, I have brothers that are 10, 15 years older than I am, they could take a gun to school for show and tell. So it's not the firearms. Anyone with that spends any time, sets their emotions aside and really logically thinks about this, understands that what goes on is a thing called murder. We have laws against murder. We catch the murderers, we try them, we convict them, we punish them or rehabilitate them, whatever you want to call it. That's how all this works. That's all that's going on. It's terrible. Anytime someone's murdered, it's tragic. But I didn't do it. So why are they wanting to infringe on my constitutional right? None of it makes any sense. So I did a little longer thinking, did a little more research, did a little more reading, and unfortunately here's the conclusion I've come to. I think actually what they're after isn't the firearms at all. Well, it's only the firearms in part. The Second Amendment is part of the Bill of Rights, but it's part of the Constitution. It's part of the set of rights that we are guaranteed under law. If they can start to chip away at the Second Amendment, they can go after the rest. If you can dilute our constitutional rights to the point where we effectively can't enforce them, you can turn this country from a republic into an oligarchy. Want to know what an oligarchy is? Russia. Russia right now is an oligarchy. It is a government ran by a few at the very top, the upper echelon. And some would say, well, we're already there. The reality is, according to the Constitution, we are the government, all of us. In other words, it's what the word republic means. It's the people. In other words, it's the law. The law is what is sovereign here in the United States. It's not a person. It's not God. It's not any of that. It has never been any of that. God doesn't run this country according to the Constitution. It is ran by the people. So it is ran by the law. The law is sovereign in the United States. If you can dilute the meaning of the law to the point where individuals are no longer in control of the country, meaning that the republic is no longer a thing, well, you've essentially destroyed the United States. So our law comes from two sources. First, we have statutory law. That's, where we elect these folks to go to our central place of government, whether that's, your county, your city, your state, or Washington, D.C., and they represent us, and they decide what the laws are. They vote and go through a process. They write it down. And that's statutory law, and we're all bound by it. The other place that our laws come from is what's called common law. That is, or judicial precedence is another way of saying that. So somewhere in history, a judge makes a decision on a unique piece of law, and that sets a precedent where later in history, another similar case like that is tried, and they cite that earlier judge's decision and say, that's the law because that decision was made. And, that's how it works. We can go all the way back as far as England and, the Magna Carta. It gets cited as precedents for laws or for decisions here in 2018. It's kind of scary, but honestly, we have the finest form of government the world has ever known. Humanity's never produced a better form of government. So it's not perfect, but it works better than anything we've ever done before. And it still works. The problem with precedents, though, is if you can set a precedent, it becomes law. So I want to talk about what just happened at the U.S. District Court in the District of Massachusetts. They reviewed the Massachusetts assault weapons ban and said that the AR-15, or an assault weapon, is not covered under the Second Amendment. In other words, they ignored the statement coming up out of Heller versus D.C. that says weapons in common use are protected under the Second Amendment. They ignored it. It's wrong, but it sets a precedent. I likely suspect that this will get appealed, and if it goes all the way to the top, which would be the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declines to hear it, as they have been doing over the last couple of years, that will become the law. So what have we done here? We've set a precedent that, in fact, lawmakers at the city, county, state, and federal level can infringe on our rights. They've diluted the Second Amendment. Well, if they can do that, it sets a precedent that they can come dilute any amendment, any right that we have. And as you continue to march through that process, you end up destroying all of our rights. You dilute them to the point where we can no longer enforce them, and the United States is dead. We become an oligarchy, like Russia. That's what scares me. That's why I get so passionate about this. It isn't just about your guns. It isn't just about the Second Amendment. It is literally about all your rights that you have naturally being diluted to the point where you can no longer enforce them. And I don't know about you, but that scares the crap out of me. I want to see all of these people pushing to limit our Second Amendment rights. I want to see them come out as boldly as possible. I want to see them come out and say, that's right, we're taking all your guns away. We're going to completely infringe on it. In fact, we're going to try and roll back that Second Amendment. That's what they want, at least the people on the ground. That's what they're all marching about. That's really what they're after. And if we can get right to that point where they can make that statement, we've got a shot at stopping the precedent that they're going to set. So absolutely lobby, call your senators and your congressmen, and stand up against these bad infringements on our Second Amendment. But don't forget, they're not just after that one. They're after them all. Look at gun violence protection orders. That's a violation of your Second Amendment, your rights to due process, your right to against unlawful search and seizure. If you really go look at it, it's another chip away. It's not just the Second Amendment that they're on. They're after all of them. And in the name of safety. All right. We're going to shoot some guns.